Well, hi there. This is Jason over at Freedom Healthworks. Thanks for joining me. Just want to spend a few minutes talking about Freedom Healthworks solution for value-based primary care. I think you're going to find this very intriguing. So I'll go ahead and get into it. Now, if you want to learn more about me or my team or about DPC, visit our website, freedomhealthworks.com. Also, if you we have some really good content on our Freedom Healthworks channel on YouTube, so check that out as well. So our value-based primary care solution really starts out with these 5 tenets. Number one is high value. And I think that's pretty consistent amongst all of the value-based primary care solutions. We start separating at number 2, where we really emphasize strong relationships between patient and physician. And I'll talk more about that here in a second, why we do that. Number 3 is the expansion of primary care. So what we find when we work with a lot of our doctors as they're launching their practice is they become challenged again because the coming out of the fee-for-service world really hampers the way that they practice. And so they want to be able to be challenged, and there's a lot of expertise that they have that they're not able to utilize. Number 4, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to primary care medicine. And so you'll find a lot of diversity amongst all of our physicians in the way that they practice and their philosophies. All of it obviously evidence-based, but it's a way for the patient or employee to be engaged, to find the doctor that best fits them. And so I think that's really important. And then number 5 is improved health outcomes. And that's just, I think, something driven by solving the access problem as well as solving the relationship problem with primary care as well. So all these 5 things lead to high patient satisfaction and lower cost for your health plan. So Freedom Healthworks is a unique entity where we help on the supply side of DPC. So we work with physicians who are interested in going into DPC, whether they're coming from an employed position, from a near site clinic, an employer clinic, or if they're coming from the hospital world. We work with those physicians from square one. And our main role and our main purpose is to launch those practices and support those practices. And so our first phase is really connect with physicians that are interested in DPC. So we do a lot of educational content that reaches out to residency programs, to physician groups, to individual physicians, getting them introduced to the DPC model and what's unique about Freedom Healthworks. But so we also vet physicians. And so we want to make sure the physicians we're working with, number one, their motives are in line with direct primary care and solving the problems with healthcare. Number two, that they're great physicians. The launch phase is where we take a physician that we've vetted and launch them through the process. And that could, that's a simple, quick process for us, or simple for the physician, complex for us. But it involves creating their LLC, launching their digital presence, integrating all their systems together, providing training and content that they can use for themselves and for their front office person. And then launching that practice, getting it available for that practice to see patients. After that, we support the practices. So we do it's very much a data-driven process where we are able to see the practices at a bird's eye view and help those practices succeed. And then we connect those practices to bigger entities, whether that's employer groups, whether that's physician forums that we do internally, new technology, processes, services, things that can expand the reach of primary care that provide not only a high value to the patients, but also a better patient-physician relationship. So this is the way we look at it, is DPC is successful at its current form, but it's not scalable. And so where we fit is we help it scale. So we start with those physicians that are interested in DPC, and there's a lot of them out there. And usually it starts with physicians that are really maybe upset with the current healthcare system, maybe they're burnout. And we educate them and get them engaged in DPC. Where we differ is now we start linking those practices or physicians to available opportunities. And those opportunities could be primarily on the employer side. And so once we do that, then DPC becomes a viable option for those physicians. And that's where we start attracting a lot of physicians coming out of the fee-for-service world that are now interested in DPC where they weren't before. And so that we have more success stories, we have more practices that are successful, and the story just spreads. And we have more and more doctors reaching out to us, interested in DPC, interested in opportunities for DPC, and so on and so forth. So this is where kind of a visualization of where we're starting to hit the market of primary care doctors. And so right now, the primary care, well, majority of the primary care doctors, and I've talked to a lot of them, are really innovators, and that's a great descriptor for where DPC physicians are today. And so they're the renegades out there in the market, and they're gonna take on all the risk, and they're gonna pave the way for other physicians to be able to do this as well. Where we start reaching into is more of the where the population of primary care doctors are, the early adopters, the early majority. And this is where we're starting to reach doctors that may know a little bit about direct primary care and think of it as the ideal model for them, but don't see themselves doing it because of the risk involved. And so we start tackling that, and now we have a lot more physicians that we're engaging with. So where we fit is when we launch these practices, we support these practices, we unify these practices as a common unit. And so then we're able to link those practices either as a one-off or as a group of 20 practices to employer groups, large and small. And so that makes it really easy for us to manage those relationships between all the DPC practices, provide a very data-driven approach to the employer, to the broker, to the practices and patients themselves, and get everyone involved. So that's done a lot through coordination. So coordination spans a huge spectrum. And that's our coordination with the practices, coordination with the employer. It's coordination with our partners. And so we're kind of the driving element of that. And so that allows us to be able to multiply this and scale this as big as we want because we have the infrastructure available to coordinate between all of these groups. But it also, insights are really important. So this is the data piece that we took some time with our partner, KPI Ninja, to be able to develop. But the insights are providing the insights that each stakeholder needs within this process. So employers get their version of what they need to see that make sure that they feel comfortable getting the value out of the primary care side that they need. It provides insight back to our practices to help us be able to steer them to provide excellent care and excellent service. And then lastly, services and pricing. So we're able to unify our practices together and bring services that they're not able to get as an independent DPC practice, but also pricing. So we're driving pricing lower and lower and lower as we bring on more patients and more practices. So these are some of our partners. So we have great partners, and we work very closely with them. And that ranges all the way from the data side with KPI Ninja. We have a really strong relationship with them, all the way to Hint, VaxCare, which is our vaccination provider, Rubicon MD, but all of these are a piece of the solutions that we provide to the physicians. So talking about the data piece, so earlier this year we announced a partnership with KPI Ninja. They're a pivotal piece of what we do and kind of our growth. But what this does is, again, I mentioned this before, but it allows each stakeholder to get the insights they need to be able to manage their piece. So the employer has information on utilization, service indicators. So make sure that when people are calling, they're getting answered, or they're getting answered in a timely manner. We're able to take that same information, provide it to the practice themselves to help manage their front office staff, to help make sure that they're staffing at the right times. And then we start digging into the clinical side. So we can see how many visits they take, or how many visits they have, how many engagement points they have, how many virtual visits, how many messages they see. We can benchmark that across the network as well. And so what it does is it allows practices to be able to sleep at night to say that I'm doing things optimally. And if there's any issues that we can foresee, so for an example, if a physician's maybe they're overutilized, or maybe they're feeling too overwhelmed or something like that, we can go in and we can adjust schedules or things like that. Brokers and employers can also engage with this information and get the things that they request and they need. So where do we fit? So we are right between the health plan and the TPA. So we work hand in hand with the TPA to help execute your health plan. And so we want to make sure that the health plan is really wrapped around the DPC portion, and that you're getting the most that you can out of DPC within the health plan. We want to provide excellent value to your employer groups. DPC is something that is not only um, not only can reduce your cost of your health plan or claims, but it can help retain those costs over time. And I think DPC is probably even stronger doing that. But what we see with our primary care is that we can expand the scope of direct primary care. It's not only just what patients experience at their local hospital network. What doctors can do is they can coordinate care through the hospital system, through the healthcare system in general. They can coordinate with specialists. They can coordinate with any emergencies. So, the first point of contact for urgent care and ER visits is typically going to be our primary care doctor. They can do skin procedures and things that primary care doctors would normally send those patients off to a specialist within the network. We don't do that, so really it's all self-contained. So fee-for-service is, um, a very limited model of primary care. It's really the gatekeeper. But then when you start getting into more general versions of value-based primary care, then they start expanding their services. We're seeing that across, independents as well. But with Freedom Healthworks and our unification kind of our multiple DPC practices, and those are growing, but we can add services like Rubicon MD. So we can link those practices directly to specialists to help contain as much of that cost with primary care as we can. So the difference between a near-site clinic and Freedom Healthworks DPC, so patients can choose and connect directly with the doctor of their choice. Once they choose the doctor of their choice, they connect with that doctor directly. And again, those practices were launched by us. So we know that patient, no matter where they go and whichever doctor they're going to engage with, their services and their systems, the way they engage with their patients is going to be similar. And that makes it easy to onboard those patients. But it also builds a much stronger trust and bond between patient and physician. So to contrast that at near-site clinics, patients may just see whoever's available. It could be an NP, it could be a doctor, and it depends on the location they go to. They may solve the access problem, but they don't solve the relationship problem. They don't solve the coordination of care issues that we have in healthcare today. Number two is talking about our flexibility. So number of patients to start a clinic practice. So near-site clinics, maybe it's 1,000, but it's a high number. And that's required to build a brick and mortar location. So that severely limits their capability to go out into rural areas or work with small groups. For us to be able to get a doctor engaged and really change the equation as far as our interest in DPC only takes about 150 to 200 individuals. And so we're, again, much more flexible, much more scalable than a traditional near-site clinic. But we don't rely on just employers to fill the practices as well. So our practices will engage with a lot of retail customers too, which is why that 150 to 200 is so important and so small, is it gives them a really good jump start to start their practice. Number three, evening and weekend communication with physician. So again, this is the continuation of care. So being a part of a DPC practice, you're always going to be engaging with that DPC physician. Because they only handle 500 to 600 patients means that they can dedicate the time that you need when you need it. And so that's a big piece of what direct primary care is. A lot of the engagement that happens within our primary care practices happens virtually. It doesn't have to happen coming into the office. So our engagement points skyrocket over traditional fee-for-service practices. And then coordination of care throughout the healthcare system. I mentioned this before. So the doctor is going to be quarterbacking whether or not that patient goes into the hospital. The doctor can still maintain contact with that patient. If they go see a specialist, they can maintain contact with either the specialist and the patient. But they can quarterback that person's healthcare and become their advocate. Some of the things that are similar. So pricing is going to be similar. So that's not anything unique to Freedom Healthworks. We can compete on price for services for things like that. Pharmacy, medications that are dispensed in the practices, imaging, and then labs. We have, I mentioned on our partnership slide, we have a partnership with LabCorp. So that's our solution to value-based primary care. And I hope you found this interesting. I'd love to talk to you about it more and go into more detail about it and show you some examples of how we're able to make this work. But you can contact me directly on my email address, jrutz@freedomhealthworks.com. My cell phone number's there. But thanks for your time. I appreciate you watching this. Help us change healthcare. There's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of potential for us to be change agents. So thanks. Have a great day.